time for another Two Women Talking. I am Leanna, tomboy. I'm here with Song W. Arts and Girly Girl, and we're going to talk about one of our combined favorite shows the next couple of episodes. We're going to talk Only Murders in the Building. Now, we are going to discuss spoilers because it's almost impossible to get into why this show is good without dealing with some major plot points. So I want to say that right off the top, there will be spoilers.
Yes.
But Song, I discovered this show really early. You came to, because I just love Steve Martin. Like, this is really nerdy that one of my big obsessions is Steve Martin. Not typical, but his biography, Born Standing Up, is very, very important to me. And his style of comedy where, he's kind of absurdist and mostly makes fun of himself instead of other people was something I was really inspired by. And I'm talking back in the day. God, I remember the Three Amigos, which doesn't hold up as badly as one might think, but it was definitely a product of its time. So how did you get into Only Murders in the Building?
You.
Okay. But when did you start watching? Did you binge it?
I started watching during season 3.
Okay, so you're quite late. So it's fresh for you. Like you watched
Yes.
it.
So
Yeah.
I came in the last couple months and I actually thought season 3 was done. So I came in at like season 3, episode 6, I think.
Oh, okay.
And so I thought the season was done, and then I binged the first couple seasons, and then I hit 3-6, and I'm
That
like,
was
what do
it.
you mean I have to watch it week to week now?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's one of the few shows that works week to week, but also works binged. I think it's obviously a more cohesive experience because you're not forgetting week to week when you binge it. But it also works week to week, I think, partially because the community, it's a very successful show is the thing, but it hasn't succumbed to that toxicity that other, very, very speculating fan bases participate in, despite the attempts. I mean, bless Selena Gomez. She has been through the wars with that, the anti fan base with her.
Yeah.
And I mean, I didn't know her as an actress before this. I knew her as a singer, but I think she's definitely the big surprise for a
Yeah.
lot of people. The putting myself in her shoes and having to do comedy with it's a cavalcade of greats.
Yeah.
By season 3, it's like, okay, girl, you've done all this, you've done great. Here's Meryl Streep now, no pressure. Like, holy crap, this girl, and with everything she's gone through personally, this was her coming back from a very, very serious struggle with lupus. I mean, that doesn't go away.
No.
So she's still managing that. But she lost a kidney,
Yeah.
I think. I mean, she was real sick. And what a reinvention, only to sort of go back. Let's just break down the characters, starting with Mabel, because Mabel is actually the character that shares the biography, well, the connection to the season 1 murder through the showrunner. I want to say John Hoffman. That's his name. Yeah, John
Yes.
Hoffman. It's co-created with Steve Martin. But
Yes.
John Hoffman was the one that had a year before he started writing this show, a friend of his was found dead with someone else. It was deemed to be a murder-suicide. And he couldn't believe his friend could be a murderer. Now, I had a guy I dated in high school turn out to be a murderer. I did not go and investigate the whole thing. No, in that case, it was more cut and dried. But he hadn't spoken to this guy in 20 years. It was one of those things, they never had a falling out. They just sort of grew apart. And he needed to find out what happened. And it turned out that the investigation had got it wrong. They had actually reversed it. It was his friend had been murdered. It wasn't a suicide. And that's, I mean, that's a lot. It explains why there's something special about Mabel, not just in the performance, but in her as a character. I've never quite seen a character like her in anything. What about you?
Mabel is such an interesting character, especially when you put her next to the others. But yeah, I definitely see what you mean about that realism. And we haven't seen it in seasons 2 and 3, but in season 1, we saw her mother who was like, you've got to stop obsessing over this.
Yeah.
And it's like I can totally see that being, and it's also interesting because as you watch it, you realize she can't move on from the death of her friend Zoe
Yeah.
without solving Tim's death,
Yeah.
because she's just been stuck in place this whole time, and her mom doesn't get it clearly, but it's like
Yeah.
she's been stuck in place and she needs to solve this, and so she gets that freedom when they do.
And it stops her from being a cliche in the girl character as the mature one who ruins the fun of the other two. That is what makes me so happy about Mabel, because I tend to hate that character. The
Yes.
the serious woman, like Mabel is the anti Sylvie from Loki. She is, yes, she's the one, hey guys, get back to work. But that
Yes.
personal connection to the whole thing, one, works. Two, Charles and Oliver are kind of disasters. And I mean, I don't know where to, I mean, we could spend an hour on each character, but then it's the dynamic between them, because Mabel is off.
I,
And that,
I I will say, I think it helps that Mabel's humor is built into that
it's so deadpan.
situation.
Yeah.
Yes, where it's the
Deadpan,
deadpan. Great.
deadpan
Are we?
comedy is so
Mhm.
hard, and she nails it.
Mhm.
She was known for her, sarcastic quips in
Yeah.
previous shows. What was it? Was it Wizards of Waverly Place?
Yeah. So
Yeah,
she
okay.
was an early 2000s Disney Channel star, which,
Yeah, she came up at the same time as Demi Lovato, right?
mhm.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
she was known for sarcasm, but it was still likable sarcasm. The way she is almost creepy at times. It's that thing that is missing from so many of those straight man woman characters. I mean, being
Mhm.
a straight man is hard. Having done that in a comedy team, because you're having to set up jokes, but then also take your moments, but you can't compete with the really broad comedy. I mean, you're not going to out Mountain Short. He's just been doing what he does for so many years. And Steve Martin is just so phenomenally good at so many elements of comedy. The way she made it her own, and I'm sure she got a lot of help, but it just shows what an actress can do when she is given decent material and what's on the page doesn't clash with the performance. And I mean, when it comes down to it, they just cast the right person. Period.
Yes.
End of story. I can't think of anybody else who could do what Selena Gomez does there, because she's weird and she's obsessed, and I don't want to call her likable, because that's almost um likable's wrong, relatable's wrong. There's something that feels real about her.
Mhm.
And I think that's so important. And that's a big lift, because Charles and Oliver don't work unless there is that massive dose of reality. And I think the fact that it's based on, John Hoffman's own story informs some of that reality.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And
Because she's not really likable at first, is she? like deliberately.
No. And that's the weird thing, because like you do like her as a character,
Right. But not
but
necessarily as a person. She does some very challenging things.
yes.
Yeah, I don't want to get
And
ahead of that because that's my big praise of season 2.
especially, well, I mean, season one, I think it's like the first episode is when we find out that, she's hiding something,
Yeah.
which, but I just want to say the writing of that very first pilot episode,
Oh, so good.
just the way they weave the three characters together,
Yep.
starting with the opening narration
Yep.
and with each of them just setting up who they are in a way that's totally natural.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, sometimes the narration, it's just there to cover gaps in the
Yeah.
script.
Yeah.
This clearly was not
No.
that. It's
No.
so well done. Just
Well,
the way
the show's fusion format is very deliberate. The fact that they're combining true crime podcasts, which is a very modern thing, and then
Mhm.
the locked room mystery, which you know fell out of favor for a really long time, but now is starting to come back. And I think that format has allowed them to have really tight writing. I can't say enough about the writing, which is usually a weakness on streaming shows. It's not here in a show with many, many strengths. The writing's fantastic, and I kept waiting for it to fall apart, and it hasn't yet.
Oh yeah, especially when we were coming up on season 3.
Oh yeah,
I
the
was
season
like,
3 slump, I was bracing for it.
oh yeah, same. And just so well done. And like you
Yeah.
said, bringing in Meryl Streep, because I mean, each season has had guest stars that were big. Well,
Yeah.
season 1 had Sting, which
it, the willingness for people to come on and do self-parody. I
and yeah, and see, like, when this is an odd comparison, but like back in the 70s, I believe, when they did the Muppet Show,
yes.
it's with season 1, no one wanted to do that show.
Yeah.
So all the producers and everyone was pulling every favor they
Yeah.
could to get guests
And
on that
now,
show.
yeah.
But it wasn't until I think they had a Russian male figure skater on. I don't remember his name, but like once he was there, suddenly everyone started to realize the potential. And
Oh.
like that's when they started getting Julie Andrews and Elton John and these big names.
Right.
Last season they even had Johnny Cash. Um, but it's it's that difference of pulling favors. And so like this first season they had Sting,
Right.
and like he's not involved in the story, he was only in 1 or 2 episodes, but it was also hilarious.
Yeah,
And
I think was more almost world building to really get the sense, because if you don't know how those New York building associations work,
mhm,
and this is what I love about this show. They don't necessarily assume that you do.
yes.
They're very clearly uh making sure that people who don't understand how snooty these buildings in certain neighborhoods in New York are, and the fact that they can determine whether you get to stay there or not using Sting as the penthouse tenant for season
Yes.
1, I thought worked very well on multiple levels, but it gave that flavor of somebody with a lot of money who's going to be around a lot, because they don't want the empty unit.
Mhm.
Yeah. Because then you get subletters, and then you get Mabel, and they I think they make the point that she's something of an undesirable without, and doesn't fit in, without belaboring it to the point that it's not fun.
Yeah, because like there's even the point, I think it's in season 1, where it's okay, we're kicking you out. You can't
Yeah.
kick my aunt out of her apartment. I'm kicking you out.
Yeah. Yeah, because they get to say whether you're allowed guests. They get to say it is very much a locked room. the way those things work in New York. And let's move over to I don't know where to go next with Charles or Oliver, because they do work together. I mean, Steve Martin is doing classic Steve Martin with Charles, a character with a lot of neuroses, like just so unlucky in love and personal relationships. This is, if you followed Steve Martin for a while, this is a hallmark of his.
And
he always makes himself the biggest butt of the joke.
it's also interesting because he plays it so well that he is likable.
Yeah.
But there's the little things that make you realize, no one wants to be around this guy. Like the fact he doesn't tip at the end of the year the way some people do. He just sends an autographed picture of himself.
Oh, because I mean, both him and Oliver, they don't have the money they once did. And it's Charles is incredibly insecure. He's a better person than Oliver is. But he's struggling. I mean, he clearly had issues before he got, the Columbo style show Bravos that's featured in the show, but that feeling of, and this is one of these things that you can relate on many levels. You can get as much of it or as little of it as you pick up on, but to be a TV actor who didn't get anything after that big TV show, that's a particular shame in acting, because TV at the time was not considered an actor's medium. It was considered kind of a star medium. This was before the rise of premium cable. So you did, like, he's a Jerry Orbach type from Law and Order, where, they never leave. Those shows go forever.
Yeah. It's like, how long was not Dan Harmon. That was the guy from Rick and Morty. The Gibbs on NCIS.
Yeah, Mark Harmon.
Yeah, Mark Harmon. He was there for like 16 years, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, that was partially because that was something of a reimagining of his image, but also he was a producer on it. I mean, he but so Brazos was before that boom. So it's the double thing of, here's a guy, he was kind of a trailblazer in terms of people liked those shows, which is why shows like Law and Order came out, but they were very corny. And the fact that and I know people who can remember every episode because it was their life. It was so important to them, and it wasn't very good, but they were going to be the absolute best cliche TV detective that they possibly could be, and then it was over. And I don't do that. People tell me things about shows, and I remember I knew it chapter and verse at the time, but they just disappear to make way for other things.
Yeah. And it's very clearly like his show was a Kojak ripoff.
Yeah, Kojak, Columbo.
Yeah, because I mean, we see the clip where like he's putting something in his mouth. I don't remember if it was gum or something.
Yeah.
But it was very clearly mimicking the Kojak lollipop.
Right. Yeah.
And it's very clearly like a less dark Kojak.
Yeah. And so you've got a show that is very campy, and it's his life. And he's had nothing since then. So of course he's gonna be and he's got that manic energy of a guy who hasn't moved on and still thinks he's gonna get another break. And that manic energy is a real thing with performers. I mean, that's a hard place to tap into for someone with Steve Martin's success. And maybe he still feels it. For some people, it never quite goes away because, a lot of performers, there's this need to be liked. It is a need. There's something missing inside of them, and the adulation of the public is what's going to take it away, and then it doesn't.
Yeah.
And that's Charles in a nutshell. And then he's got an obvious anxiety condition on top of it. So he's got anxiety, but he also is socially awkward. And there are a lot of performers. I mean, we talk about Henry Cavill a lot, who are kind of awkward.
Yes.
There are a lot of really great actors who are awkward.
Not a lot of people realize that the reason Henry Cavill takes his dog everywhere is because it's an emotional support dog.
Yeah, and then that's people are very, very close to the dogs in LA. He's just honest about it.
Yeah. And because I mean, he's very open. He doesn't like being around people, but it is also, one of my things is, I like attention. I'm a
Right.
diva. I'm very honest about that.
Right.
And so I understand what you mean when you say it's these actors. It's like you need the adulation of the crowd. You need that validation that you're doing something well, and just one person
Right.
isn't really enough to tell you that. You need an entire stadium cheering your name, basically.
Yeah.
So
yeah, the interesting about Charles Hayden Savage on Only Murders is he's that pitiable creature. He's probably actually an introvert. He has social anxiety. He's very awkward in crowds, and I mean, but he does need that adulation as opposed to someone like me who's just, I don't know if I ever totally trusted it. I always preferred, the thing that made me feel good in theater was my peers, the people who were in the production with me, noticing I did a good job. The crowd was just the crowd. I actually liked the exploration of character, and that's why I'll see actors who I suspect are quite shy because I know the meticulously crafted tells that some of them do. And Martin Short's like this as a performer. You never see Martin Short not in character in public.
Yes.
And so, Steve Martin does have a persona, but because Steve Martin's gotten into directing and writing and all that stuff, he has to be a bit more, he has to be able to turn it off in public, and he's been a really great leader on Only Murders. I credit him for the big reason that the rabid fans of the show are not as toxic as some, despite there being, a very successful social media personality in Selena Gomez on it, because Steve Martin leads by example.
I do think there is also the fact that the show is a bit more mature, not so much in content, just the story overall.
Well, it's crafted and there's clearly more to it, and it does the way they set up the characters. If you're one of those people that go, that's so cringe, and you run away, you're not going to like this show. You're going to be gone in the first episode. I mean, Howard alone will have you run screaming.
It's very intelligent. I don't want to say intellectual because I mean that word has connotations, but it is very well crafted, like you said. And
they don't unnecessarily expand or complicate things. They will keep, they bring in gut milk in season 1, and you just show them drinking it later on. They don't reference it. It's just there, but it's
still all throughout season 3 too.
Oh yeah, they're constantly slinging it because he's got cases and cases and cases of the crap, right?
And he's probably still signed up because it's a multi-level marketing thing. So he's getting a new case every month.
Yeah, well, it's also, I mean, with Oliver, his weird food things
with the dips.
Well, he's gonna like gut milk because it's food that isn't food. And there are a lot of people in theater, especially New York, the personality of certain producers or directors, you need to be a big thing
Mm-hmm.
because you need to get people into your shows, and it's getting harder and harder to launch a new concept, which is why I think Hamilton took it so by storm. Is it wasn't, The Color Purple the musical, or Lion King the musical, as good as Lion King is as a piece of, spectacle. The fact that it was new.
Well, I'm pretty sure, like back when the Lion King musical came out in the 90s,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was kind of looked down on as being overly commercial. But
Even though, look at how many Black people that show employed. Like, that was
yes,
actually the musical that made it a benefit to be a Black
yes.
person on Broadway. It did it before Hamilton, but again, it was Disney, and it was based on a movie, and there was this concern that they were going to get overrun because
Well, I mean that fear wasn't invalid because we look at it now. We've got Mean Girls the musical, Heathers the musical, Back to the Future.
yeah, even my beloved Spamalot is Monty Python and the Holy Grail. I'm seeing it
Yes.
again. By the time this airs, I'm seeing it again next weekend in Stratford, because I have to see every production of Spamalot, because I have to see The Lady of the Lake. I have to see which celebrity parody they do. And my friend who told me about it, I'm like, who do they do with Lady of the Lake? He says, you have to see it. I'm not going to tell you. I'm like,
Oh God.
so I'm going to see it. But
Okay, so you're gonna have to tell me
yeah, of course, because
because
you're not
I'm,
going to be able to see it. The thing
of
about
course.
Spamalot, for people who don't know, The Lady of the Lake is always a different celebrity parody. So it's Cher, Lady Gaga, Tina Turner. So there's no type for the actress. You just have to be able to sing the song that goes like this with the key change. Uh, but it it really opens it up, because being different is good in that
Mm-hmm.
part. You're not trying to mimic what Lin-Manuel Miranda did as Alexander Hamilton. I'll be glad when they reimagine that role, because I actually think, as much as I love that musical overall, he was actually wrong for it.
Lin-Manuel Miranda, in my opinion, he's not charismatic on stage.
See, I
He,
like him, just
I,
not in that. The lyrics, he's another one. The lyrics don't match the performance.
it's overwritten.
Oh, it's definitely overwritten, but even then he's talking about how, a hard Scrabble, and he can't control his temper, and he's the meekest character in the whole thing.
Maybe that's it, and maybe I still think it's a lack of charisma, but he is meek, and
Yeah.
there's a line, I think, in one of the cabinet battles, and we won't stay on Hamilton long, but there's a line in one of the cabinet battles, I think, where Thomas Jefferson points out, like, he primps and preens and dresses like the pits of fashion,
Mm-hmm.
and another line where he calls him out for dressing
Yeah.
as nice as he can, basically, which totally makes sense because
Right.
he's a man who came from nothing. Now
That's
he's in a
right.
position of power, so he has to flaunt it,
That's right.
and it makes him extremely the nouveau riche
Yes.
thing,
Yeah.
which,
And
and the Gilded Age comes back this weekend, so I'm looking forward to that.
well, and that's interesting that we did, because that's important to understanding why Only Murders works. A lot of those buildings, like the Arconia, were built in the Gilded Age, the era that the Gilded Age is based on. And
Yeah.
so they feel old, they have quirks about them, and there is this, all through New York, there is culture. It does feel alive as a city in a way that LA doesn't. And if you like Only Murders in the Building, watch Steve Martin's LA story, because it's basically doing to LA what he does to New York in Only Murders. But it is very self-aware about how obnoxious New York money can be. And the little details here and there are, so, as much as people like Bunny and stuff like that are grating there's obviously a love for all of it with the deli and, the old passages and ducts in the building that they know
And
are
it's
there
like,
and are
well,
useless and they never fix it because it's history. Yeah.
I mean, when we got to season 2 and suddenly, oh, there's a secret elevator, there's secret paths, you totally believed it.
Oh, they
Because
exist.
yeah, it's like it didn't have to be referenced in season 1 because it made sense.
And a lot of the people that live in buildings like that, they come from very old money and
Mm-hmm.
they do nothing, which is why every little nitpicky thing um in the building is this big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And they might not be fabulously fantastically wealthy, but they have enough money that they don't have to work. And
Yeah.
so they are nosy busybodies. And you don't need to know that is a thing in New York to enjoy Only Murders, but they definitely very lovingly included that.
Yes.
Because we don't actually know what Howard does. We just know he's the cat guy.
He's a librarian.
That's right. And he's not owning that apartment on a librarian salary.
No,
That
that's a
means
good
money
point.
is coming from somewhere.
Yeah.
They come from money, which is why they have the socialization and the sensibilities they do. But it's perfect for that Agatha Christie style locked room setting that they graft onto a true crime podcast. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where Oliver Putnam comes in. Because I think Oliver, first of all, it was probably an excuse for Martin Short and Steve Martin to work together again.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, when they start, they're both, I think, in their 70s. I know Steve Martin is. Martin Short's up there.
Mm-hmm.
But Martin Short is a very nice guy who takes a lot of crap from hipsters who don't understand. You don't get to choose what you're known for as an actor. You get hired for things and you do the best possible job, and then you get branded that thing forever. And the people who think you should just be super picky choosy on the roles you take and just never do anything embarrassing, that's not the way it works. And Martin Short is, I've never heard anybody say a single bad thing about him as a person. People love to shit on his body of work.
Mm-hmm. He's 73.
He's
So
73.
yeah,
Okay,
he
there
is
you
up
go.
there. I didn't realize he was in the Santa Claus 3.
Oh, he's been in some, because it's money, it's work. He has a family that he
Mm-hmm.
actually likes, and this is a job, this is an income, and he believes that people, and this is a bit of a crutch. This is handling rejection. I'm telling you, as somebody who has to deal with it too, that people don't want to see him, people want to see the character, so he is on in
Mm-hmm.
every media appearance he ever does. And I forget which magazine, one of the snotty like Slate type
Uh,
things.
During season 3, did
Yeah,
that.
did that
Oh
really
God,
nasty, and the internet just turned.
the
And again,
backlash.
oh, people were like, "What is your problem?" And everybody talked about their favorite broad over the top Martin Short character. And so he is perfect to play Oliver Putnam. Again, I can't think of a better person, because even though Oliver is, and Oliver actually is a narcissist. It's like the show is the anti-Loki, right? Oliver actually is. He doesn't connect with people. Um, and they play, but he is likable in a superficial way,
Mm-hmm.
because Martin Short is actually a good person and you want to like him. But Oliver's terrible. He's
Oh
a
God,
terrible person.
but like, here's the thing, especially in season 2, where like his son talked about his background and like
Yeah.
the Son of Sam killer card game,
Yes. Oh
party
God.
game, and just the sheer charisma in those flashback scenes, you really understood why people would go along with his schemes.
Mm-hmm.
Even when they were terrible ideas, you understood. Just for the record, though, I didn't quite understand the Son of Sam killer game, because it's like, oh, it's all these, what was it, brunettes, I
Yeah.
think. The thing is, the Son of Sam, his first two or three victims were brunettes, and so the cops started to think, oh, this must be his MO. He's specifically going after.
Mm-hmm.
Now I don't remember if it's blondes or brunettes. I know the show got it mixed up.
Yeah.
But it turned out that it was just coincidence, because the
Yeah.
Son of Sam was choosing his victims based off where he could find parking.
Yeah.
In Manhattan.
Yeah. But it was just, I mean, the whole thing was so dark.
Yeah.
That only somebody with narcissistic tendencies would think that's a fun party game.
Yes. But it's like, you saw how well he did it and how easily he could charm someone.
Yeah.
So
Which is he has that ability that neither Charles nor Mabel have.
mm-hmm.
And that's why it works. And they both, I do think I think they're not blind to his flaws,
Mm-hmm.
but he's just part of the team now. And
Yeah.
he does get them access. He got them the sponsor.
Yes.
Which was a really good way, okay, the one thing I didn't find realistic at all was that, well, it is realistic because you just need a rich friend if you want to get your podcast sponsored. That I was, how do I get my podcast sponsored? Have a rich friend and have them waste money. That is how most podcasts are sponsored. So they make Oliver essential to get over the fact that he is terrible. Unlike Charles is just pathetic. Mabel, I think Mabel has just gotten a raw deal from the
Mabel is
beginning.
traumatized.
Yeah. Mabel, it's easy to feel for Mabel.
Also, Mabel is just a millennial.
Well, I love the way they include a millennial in this show, which I mean, it's one of those things where nothing is allowed to totally be for just a particular demographic. So a show aimed at, Gen X as well. How do you get millennials and Gen Z? And then, there was that whole thing Sofia Coppola talked about how does your Little Mermaid appeal to 35-year-old men?
Yeah.
So they worked it in, but they worked it in a way that actually
makes
said
sense.
something. And it is, in the age of podcasting, you couldn't just have two old guys.
Mm-mm.
And I love the pan-generational friendship element of the show. I do think everybody needs a crazy old person in their life, and I'm not just saying it because I'm getting there. I'm getting close to the crazy old friend territory. But the way the three of them work together, and when they do clash, it doesn't seem like that, like, the predictable Act 3 breakup. The stuff breaks down because Mabel's very secretive because she is traumatized and she doesn't tell them things that maybe she should.
Yeah.
And Charles is not reliable. He doesn't have the pretty simple anxiety attacks. He has the ones that happen even when it's inconvenient.
It's also that his priorities are all over the place.
His priorities are finding someone to tell him what to do, which is why his romantic life is a disaster.
Pretty much.
But there are guys like, I know so many guys.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, who their primary, and they don't realize their primary motivator for wanting a woman in their life is so they don't have to make decisions. But red flag for everybody. Somebody who wants you to make their decisions for them, because then they blame you. Because nothing's their fault and everything's your fault because they can't handle anything being their fault. But Charles, that kind of stuff has created misdirections and challenges and problems in the show from the beginning. Like Charles' awful taste in women. I mean, we all thought the bassoon thing was just Steve Martin, ironic instrument. That's his thing. But they actually managed to make it relevant in that almost magical way that locker room mysteries make things feel comfortingly connected.
And like, here's the thing, as bizarre as the whole bassoon player thing was, there are people who are like that.
Oh yeah.
About their hobby, and it's like, oh, I have all these shirts and this bag and everything for my bassoon. And,
oh yeah.
I'm gonna make.
I love nerdy instrument players.
Yes. So it's like and you don't even see it just with instrument players. It's just these people who it's like, oh, they have this one hobby, or they make it their profession, and it's their one personality trait.
Okay, until it's their one personality trait, I was gonna go, I know nothing about that song. Because I have my special interests. I am very big on them. I'm all in. Enough about Alan Wake 2. It's finally out.
It's kind of funny. I was listening to a book review last night, and it's one I'd listened to before, but I'd forgotten that at one point he makes a reference to being excited about Alan Wake 2, and I'm like, I know someone else who's very excited about that.
I'm not alone. It's so weird. Everybody's coming out of the woodwork now, which makes me happy. But anyway, back to Only Murders. Yeah. And they brilliantly zero in on the fact that true crime podcasts want crime to be neat and every detail is relevant because they grew up loving things like Agatha Christie. And life's not really like that. Even Sherlock Holmes. But Sherlock Holmes, I mean, you actually read those stories and they weren't actually brilliant mysteries. They were adventure stories where he was solving a crime. It wasn't until the BBC turned them into more locked room style mysteries to serialize them for television that they took on that format. But they show, true crime podcasts get it wrong. And the sometimes disastrous impacts on people because citizen sleuths are accusing people of murder.
And we accused Sting because he didn't like dogs.
Right, exactly. And it calls to that certainty that we crave as humans, but that actually doesn't exist. And that's sort of the format spark, the structure spark in Only Murders that I can't say enough good about. Because you see that so rarely now, especially in streaming television, something that actually adheres to structure and doesn't break it the minute they panic. There was no episode 3 flashback that derailed the whole thing in Only Murders in the Building.
The writing on that show is so well done. I cannot tell you how happy it made me that the season 2 murder was set up in the prologue of season 1.
They give you little things along the way, and I think that was somebody, like I said, it's the gut milk, tangible detail. They use what they got instead of introducing a new detail. So instead of just getting a whole new cast because they're not in the building anymore, they get, Howard to be Oliver's assistant. And his boyfriend is a singer already. So he's just in the musical. They don't just wipe out the cast because they're somewhat changing location, though they did still manage to have the murder happen in the building. Although I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, because let's okay, we've sort of covered. See, you know who we haven't talked about? Who I want to talk about before we move on? The stunt double character played by, I am blanking on her name now.
Jane Lynch.
Jane Lynch. Such a clever, just absurd, just funny.
Absolutely brilliant. Like
Yeah.
when she first came in season 1, I was like, well, this is obnoxious.
Right.
But
it was intended to be a further degrading element of Steve Martin's character
which
Charles.
totally worked.
Yeah.
But like by the time she showed up in season 3, I was like, oh yeah, she's fun. I'm really happy she's here. And then of course we got that season 3 cliffhanger.
Right. But you do sort of slowly, and this is again my frustration with the way modern audiences get locked into an opinion of a character and can't change it. Because sometimes it is deliberate that you need to get used to somebody. They are a lot. And yes, you're not supposed to like her off the back. What's her name? Saz? Is that her name?
I think so.
Something like that. But I mean, I think it was just, in some cases, it was, hey, you're my friend. Can you come in and play this character? Or isn't this kind of funny? Or somebody mistook Steve Martin for Jane Lynch once, and they just ran with it the same way they make jokes that Matthew Perry looks like Rachel Maddow. But and to give Charles that additional sounding board worked well, which was believable because they would have spent a lot of time together.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean the ongoing thing about, again, Steve Martin is completely aware the entertainment industry is terrible, full of terrible people. You know, the idea that she's still dating the murderer from prison. You know, what's her name? Jan?
I think so.
Bassoon lady? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's move on to season 2. Because to me, season 2 was the weakest of the seasons. This doesn't mean it was weak. It's just, if I had to rank them, season 2 gets a bit shaky in places.
It's a bit of a sophomore slump.
A bit. I think it okay.
It's one of those things where like it's lesser than season 1, but it's still better than a majority of what's on TV.
Right, exactly. The thing for me that they couldn't have predicted was that Cara Delevingne was gonna get sucked into the whole Amber Heard Johnny Depp thing. And I admit that part of my issue with watching it when it came out is it had just come out that she was in like those Amber Heard sex parties. And it worked with the character kind of, because they were definitely making her sort of a heel, to use wrestling terms. You wanted her away from Mabel.
Oh God.
Yeah.
That character, I had to look up who it was. I did not trust her from the get-go.
Yeah, that element that Cara Delevingne has ruined Carnival Row for me. Because I couldn't see the character. I could only see her. And I actually have you seen Carnival Row?
Haven't.
Okay. Orlando Bloom's actually pretty good in it. But I don't know. It's one of those shows that never quite clicks and becomes greater than the sum of its parts. But I partially, and I didn't know who she was at the time. She just has this psycho quality to her, which I think made her perfect for that character, because, you know, the whole thing about that I think made season 2 less fun is they were showing Mabel the whole corruption of fame thing. And so there's, and I think that's important because it shows that certainly Charles didn't start off the way he did. He got sucked into that world that we see Mabel getting sucked into.
Yeah.
But I do think the plot of season 2 was the weakest of the three. Again, not no slight. It's still better than a lot of things. It's better writing than most of streaming and a lot of premium cable, I would argue.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
I also think that that Amy Schumer taking the Sting slot
It
didn't
pissed
quite
me
work.
off.
It didn't work. It wasn't self-parody enough. She was willing to be unlikable, which is the purpose there, but it didn't work the same way. I know they were trying to go different.
I'll be straight up. I don't like Amy Schumer. I don't like her sense of humor. I think she's a joke thief. I don't think she's funny. Even when she is stealing good jokes, she
No
ruins
lies
them.
detected there, and I think that was the point, is they wanted somebody playing off their I think they overdid the deliberate unlikability. I know I praised it with
Mhm.
the stunt double, the Jane
She
Lynch
just couldn't
character.
pull it off.
Yeah. Amy
It,
Schumer is Amy Schumer.
yeah, when the Barbie movie was first announced, there
Yeah.
were rumors that Amy Schumer was going to be playing Barbie.
Oh, really?
And that, it was this idea of, she's not perfect, so they kick her out of Barbie land or something.
That
And
actually was the plot of the movie.
yeah, so it's like when I saw the movie, I'm like, okay, maybe there was some validation, because this was back in like 2016 that these rumors were going around.
I mean, I could have seen her as being in the running for kind of the weird Barbie. I think they went with
Yeah.
the right person.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, Kate McKinnon. I can't believe I'm going to say this. Kate McKinnon was perfect for that part.
So, but I mean, the rumor was that she was set to be the star of the movie.
Wow.
So, but yeah, and I mean, that was about the time when she was like getting the Netflix specials, and she was a pretty big name, like I said. But it's like,
Yeah, that always struck me as, we need to promote a female comic to show we don't hate women. She's a
it's
clean comic. Let's try to make her into the new Ellen, even though she's nothing like Ellen.
that's the thing. I don't know that I've ever considered her humor clean, because it's so much
Well, there's a
sex
reason
humor.
she's doing Tampax ads.
Yeah, because it seems like that's all she ever talks about.
Yeah, I mean, comedy's gotten so be offensive
Yeah.
to, shock the audience into laughing, that she is considered not straight up clean, but she can do clean. You can
Hmm.
book her on something and she's not gonna go rogue and start,
Ah,
dropping F-bombs to do an easy laugh. She'll behave. And
yeah.
that says a lot about comedy, that there are some comics who panic so badly when they're bombing that they can't be relied on to do a clean show.
Unfortunately.
One of the most difficult skills, believe it or not, to do as a comic is being able to do clean comedy. Because, swear words just sound good. They're fun to say,
And
and
they're so cathartic.
yeah, it's fun doing radio still, because I have to not say what I really want to say. The word that would be perfect. I can't say it on the radio.
I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, here's a writing challenge for you, essentially,
Yeah.
is write without using this word.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of funny because like you've cleaned up on YouTube as well since starting the radio show. Because
Well, that's not actually for the radio show. That's just because I don't want clients to get harassed.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So when I first started listening to you back in 2020, um, there was a point I was at work, but like there was no one there. So I was listening to your video from that
Right.
day, and it was the video where you kept saying stupid fucking asshole.
Oh, I stand by that runner. But yeah.
Oh yeah, no,
Yeah.
it was a really good video.
Yeah.
But it was funny because someone finally came in
Oh
just
no.
as you were saying it, and so it's like I hit pause.
Oh yeah.
But I could never tell if he was grumpy just because he was grumpy, or if he was
Right.
grumpy because he heard that.
And I mean, that's one of the things I think with uh Only Murders is that it is oddly wholesome, despite the fact that they do have the occasional swear.
Mm-hmm.
You forget some of the things they deal with because they only use it when they have to. And I think that's my big complaint about some of these really popular content creators
Mm-hmm.
is they get popular and they panic. And so they start doing everything to get attention. And of course, the easiest thing to do to get attention is to start or respond to drama.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is, they do get really, I think part of the reason I don't watch more is it's so unpredictable and there are no limiters. And sometimes I just can't take not
Well,
knowing.
you get to that point where it's like, oh, who's an edgy boy? Are you
Well, that,
edgy?
yeah, that's the thing. I don't care. It's,
Yeah.
and I get it. I have to do it too. You have to pump out stuff so fast. You have no real time to refine it unless you're somebody like, ContraPoints who only puts out a video every 2 months or
Mm-hmm.
something like that. Like she thinks about what she says, which is, I think, part of the reason that even people who don't agree with her, I don't share a lot of her philosophies, but I still think that she's worthwhile just because she doesn't seem to just be about clicks.
Mm-hmm.
But they deal with that with the podcast because season 2 was the one where they really expanded on the fan club, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and I thought that was cute because it wasn't what people think about fan clubs when you see like Taylor Swift fans and they're all cute teenage girls. They look like actual real life obsessive fans.
Oh yeah. And I almost think that might be part of what keeps the show fandom from getting too
Right.
crazy is because they've got that little built-in pinprick.
Imitatable behavior.
Yeah. So it's like they're
See,
already making fun of it. So like I think it might keep
I
it from getting too weird in the real world.
I kind of like it because yeah, they were having fun with, not making fun of, I
Yes.
think. And I because I know that people in fandoms tend to feel very invisible.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoyed that their fans were, I mean, they were the kind of people who could obsessively follow everything they did. Because there's a people who watch your content, and then there will people who will show up for live appearances and kick money your way, the whales or the conversions,
Mm-hmm.
as they're called, and they're not the same people.
No. I am kind of surprised that the crew hasn't opened a Patreon yet. But
Yeah, I mean, I think they get enough in the funding that they're okay.
true.
But I did like the inclusion of the fan club. I did think season 2 got a little meta.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't is there much more you want to talk about season? I mean, other than the punched up Detective Williams, which yes, good call there.
She's such a great character.
Oh, so good. So
Just
good.
the way she comes in and she's so no nonsense, but then especially in season 3, it's
Well,
like,
there's an example of swearing working. That character wouldn't work as well if it wasn't, you know, donkey punches to your ears
mm-hmm.
constantly. It's the right call. And everybody, I think, when she showed up season 3, everybody's like, yay! Because Michael Rappaport just, he keeps getting put in things. And he's a big reason I don't listen to more of Howard Stern's content because he does the wrap up show.
Mm-hmm.
He served his purpose, but there was too much deliberate unlikability. And that's the thing. Jane Leeds is a likable actress playing someone unlikable. Michael Rappaport and Amy Schumer have an inherent unlikability. The actress who straddles that really well, who I think is an interesting addition and isn't overused, is Tina Fey.
Yes.
As kind of the evil, popular podcaster who is constantly tempting Mabel to join the dark side.
Oh God, she's so obnoxious. I'm not a Tina Fey fan. Like, they used her well.
Yeah, when she's used well, she's used well. There are times she's not used well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought she was perfect for this. She's very good in A Haunting in Venice as well, playing a similar type of character.
And I liked it, even as someone who, like, I follow a lot of content creators, but at the same time, the ones I prefer tend to be more niche.
Right.
And I totally bought it. Like, it works, that mid-level content creator who's achieved kind of mainstream celebrity, and the way they sell out.
Also, though, the taking it, I hate podcast read delivery. I hate it. I hate that very quiet voice that is spoken slowly so people can catch every word. You want me to turn a podcast off? Do that. And all the popular podcasts do that. There must be a reason. I have never liked it, so I don't do it. I like to be conversational. And I know that they say you have to speak slowly for people to follow it, but I tune out. And so her reads, the whole bullshit surrounding it and all the wasted money in the offices and everything like that to impress people. It was all just perfect. It was all everything I can't stand about mainstream digital content creation. They just nailed it.
And here's the thing, it timed almost perfectly this last season, because there was a true crime podcaster I was following. She has her own channel, and then she does a podcast with a retired police officer. And she's from New England. And she's great with her research, and she's very thorough, and she weaves everything into this really long form story. It's not uncommon for her stuff to go for 4 or 5 parts that are like an hour or two each. But as she's gotten bigger and she has this big stan following, just the way people are so supportive. It's middle class housewives, I know it is, but the way she talks sometimes, like there was a point in her podcast where she and her co-host, who is also white New England, and I hate to say that, but it's true, just the privilege with the way they talked.
Yeah.
At some points. And in the last few weeks, I've had to stop listening to their stuff, because she's also like, people give me such a hard time when I do this. And it's like, because you're mean to your co-host. Yeah. And your co-host is the one who's actually likable.
Right.
And, she's like, oh, we're friends. He was having a rough day. And, so I was covering. And it's like, no, you keep interrupting. Sorry to go off on this tangent. Like,
all good.
I've been following her for years, and there was another point where I had to duck out of her content, but this time it got really upsetting and really annoying, where she will not take criticism. She's very open about drug use. And like it's all legal drug use, but it's also like, it's so privileged, and she's gotten so obnoxious. And so it's like, even if I enjoy how she tells stuff, I'm just like, I cannot handle your personality right now. In 6 months or so, I may come back and listen to the back catalog, but right now I just can't stand you.
And I do like on Only Murders how they do show how you can wreck lives. This was the one where they did get a few wrong. along the way. They were
Mhm.
actually messing with the, well, I mean, okay, they got it wrong because they were deliberately being misdirected.
Yeah.
And I liked the fact that because they are sort of glamorizing true crime podcasts, they're not blind to the reality that some of them have gotten them spectacularly wrong. You know,
Yeah.
not everything can be, I know this isn't a podcast, but not everything can be making a murderer, where
Yeah.
they actually showed, you know, those folks were scum. They were trash. They made you hate him
Mhm.
because they accurately showed where the cops were coming from. And then they showed all the things that just didn't make sense. And so it really did show guilty of something isn't fair.